chosen one, there is a weight you have been carrying in your chest that you have learned not to mention. Not because it is unbearable, but because you have become so good at bearing it quietly that you are not sure anyone would notice if you set it down. It is the weight of wondering, am I seen? Does any of this matter? Has the prayer been heard? Or has it just dissolved somewhere between my lips and the ceiling? You have not said this out loud. You keep going. You keep showing up. You hold the faith, and you carry the ordinary, and you do not break. And somewhere inside, very quietly, a voice keeps asking whether any of it has been witnessed. I want to speak directly to that voice today. There is a principle that runs through the lives of those who were most profoundly changed, a pattern that appears again and again, in the wilderness of Moses, in the pit of Joseph, in the hidden years of Esther. And the pattern is this: the people God was about to use most significantly were the people heaven was most specifically occupied with, not distantly, not generally, specifically, personally, with full and intentional focus. God saw what was happening to you, and he stopped everything he had going, not because you were falling apart, not because you earned it, because of who you are, because of what you carry, because of what you are about to become. Stay with me. What you understand by the end of this is going to change how you see the last season of your life and the next one. Before we go any deeper, I want to ask you to stay until the very end, because what I am building toward here is something most people never fully receive. By the time we are done, you are going to understand why the silence you have been living in is not what you think it is. You are going to receive 4 declarations about who you actually are, declarations you can carry into tomorrow morning. And if you have been feeling like something sharp in you has gone quiet, like a gift that used to feel alive is now dim, stay for that part especially. There is a scientific and a spiritual explanation for what happened to that sharpness, and it is not what you have been telling yourself. Now let me start with something honest. The silence is real. I am not here to tell you it is not hard. I am not here to skip past the part where you have prayed and the ceiling felt like a wall, where you have been faithful in small ways, in ways nobody applauded, in ways that cost you something and nothing visibly shifted, where you have watched others receive what you have been asking for, and you held your peace, and you kept going, and somewhere deep down you wondered, does he know? Is this working? Or am I building something in a direction that has no arrival point? That is real, and it deserves to be named before anything else. But here is what I want to show you. Most of us understand God's presence the way we understand air, everywhere, sustaining everything. Not closer to one thing than another, because he is already infinitely close to everything. And that understanding is not wrong. But there is another kind of presence that does not get talked about nearly enough. Think about the difference between a parent who knows from across the house that their child is having a hard day and a parent who stops what they are doing, walks down the hall, opens the door, sits down on the edge of the bed, and turns their full attention toward that one person. No phone, no other thought, just complete and total presence directed at one specific life. Same parent, completely different kind of presence. The first kind is constant, it sustains everything, but the second kind is rare, and when it arrives, it changes everything it touches. Moses understood this. Not the Moses of the parting sea, not the Moses of fire and cloud and the thundering of Sinai. I mean the Moses of the 40 years before all of that, 40 years in the wilderness of Midian, tending sheep, invisible to the world that had once known his name. 40 years of doing ordinary things in an ordinary place with no visible sign that anything significant was being prepared. 40 years of waking up, doing the work, going to sleep, and beginning again. From the outside, that looked like a man who had been forgotten, but it was not forgetting, it was formation. Those 40 years were not the gap between the calling and the preparation. Those 40 years were the preparation. The patience that could not have been built any faster, the humility that replaced the fire of a younger man who thought he could fix things by force. The deepening of a character that would eventually carry the weight of an entire people, not just for a season, but for 40 more years of wilderness, of complaint, of slow and grinding transformation. You cannot build that kind of character in a comfortable season. You cannot hollow out the vessel in the comfort of the palace. Heaven was not absent during those years. Heaven was extraordinarily focused. There is a principle from the world of metallurgy, the craft of refining metal, that I want to give you, because I am going to come back to it more than once before we are done. When a master craftsman wants to create something permanent, something that will outlast every surface-level material around it, he does not put that metal on a shelf. He does not set it in a drawer and check on it occasionally. He picks it up. He places it directly in the fire. He holds it there, not passively, but with his attention fully on what is happening inside the material as the heat does its work. Not because the metal is worthless, because the metal has potential that ordinary room temperature can never reach. The fire is not punishment. The fire is attention, the most direct, the most focused, the most intentional kind of attention a craftsman can give to something he is trying to make permanent. You have been in the fire, and I need you to hear this not as a comforting phrase you have heard before, but as a structural truth with real weight behind it. The metal in the fire is not being destroyed. It is being made into something that will last. But here is what I want to show you next, because what I have described so far, the two kinds of presence, the formation in the wilderness, the fire that is focused attention, this is only the beginning. The next question is not whether God sees you. The next question is, what is he looking at? What did he stop everything to protect? What, specifically, is so significant in you that heaven reorganized things around it? That is where we are going now. Think about Joseph for a moment. Not the Joseph in power, standing over the storehouses of Egypt, watching his brothers arrive and not recognizing him. The Joseph at the beginning, the young man with the coat, the strange dreams, the unearned and undefended certainty that something larger was being prepared in his life. The coat was a visible sign of calling before it became a source of suffering. His father saw something in him that he could not name precisely, but could not ignore. And the brothers saw it too, which is part of why it threatened them. Because calling, when it is real, has a visibility to it, even when the person carrying it is not yet ready, even when the vessel is not yet formed. Something about it is already present. The pit did not erase what the coat represented. The years of service in Potiphar's house did not erase it. The prison, the unjust prison, the one that arrived specifically because he did the right thing, did not erase it. What looked from the outside like a life being systematically dismantled was actually a calling being driven underground, preserved under pressure, deepened by everything that tried to destroy it. There is something in you that has gone underground, and I need you to hear this with your whole chest. Underground is not gone, and I want to name something directly because it is important for everything that follows. The version of you that needed external validation before you believed your own sense of calling, that needed every room to confirm what you already knew to be true, that had built its worth on whether others could see what God had placed. That version of you has been dying quietly over these past seasons, and I know that has felt like loss. I know there have been moments where it felt like you were losing yourself. You were not losing yourself. You were losing the parts of yourself that would have misused what is coming. The ceiling you built, the reflex to stay small, to not take up too much space, to pre-disqualify your gifts before anyone else could disqualify them. That ceiling had to crack before the next season could begin. What you grieved as loss was actually preparation. And right now, if you pay attention, there are signals that something is waking up. You have started to feel restless with surface-level living. Conversations that used to satisfy now feel thin and hollow, like you are standing in a room with low ceilings, and you have somehow grown too tall for it. You have a rising intolerance for anything inauthentic in others, but most of all in yourself. Your sense of what matters and what does not has been sharpening, almost against your will. There is a vividness to your dreams, or a persistent feeling that something is right around a corner you cannot yet see, arriving without a logical source. And there is a feeling hard to name, almost embarrassing to admit, that you are almost ready. You do not know ready for what, but it is there. These are not symptoms of anxiety. They are not signs of a restless mind that cannot settle. These are markers of activation. Something in you is coming online. And what is activating is something God placed in you before you were formed. I want to show you something now that sits right at the intersection of the sacred and the scientific, because I think it is going to give you a new language for what you are already experiencing. A neuroscientist named Dr. Robert Lake spent 34 years studying what researchers call the gamma wave, the brain's most powerful frequency. And the research, confirmed across studies from MIT, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Berkeley, and Columbia University, all pointed to the same pattern. Children come into the world with gamma fully active. That is why a young child can absorb a language in months that takes an adult years. Why they see connections that trained professionals miss. Why their intuition is sharp, their creativity is unfiltered, and their sense of wonder is untouched. It is not simply that they have not been burdened yet. It is that a specific frequency in their brain is operating at full capacity. But around the age of 7, and the researchers have a name for this, they call it the decline effect. The modern world begins to suppress it. The education system. The pressure to conform. The noise that never fully turns off. The training to sit still and repeat rather than to wonder and explore. All of it gradually turns down the frequency that God placed in the human brain at birth. The frequency of intuition, of insight, of what the world calls genius and what the sacred tradition calls anointing. The world has been turning that frequency down in you since you were a child. Not through one dramatic event, through 1,000 small ones. To restore gamma through traditional methods requires $300 an hour with a biofeedback specialist, or $7,000 of home equipment and months of learning to use it. Even disciplined meditation, and I have respect for it, takes months of practice before the brain begins to shift, and most people cannot sustain it through the demands of an ordinary life. What Dr. Lake spent decades developing was a different approach entirely. He compressed the technology into a 7-minute audio track. You listen with headphones once a day, and your brain begins to align with the frequency it was born carrying. No technique required, no years of practice, just 7 minutes, and the entrainment begins from the very first listen. The product is called the Genius Song. Over 18,000 people have used it. I want to be honest with you about this. It is not a miracle, it is a tool. No one can promise you specific outcomes, and anyone who does is not telling you the full truth. What I can tell you is that the gamma wave is described in the scientific literature as a God-given frequency, and what consistently happens when it reactivates the clarity, the intuition, the sense of things moving in alignment, the moments of connection that feel like they arrived from somewhere beyond the ordinary. That pattern is documented and consistent. The standard price for the Genius Song is $49. But through the link I have placed in the description and the pinned comment of this message, not on Amazon, not on any other platform, only there is a specific price of $39 available for those receiving this today. With that, you also receive 4 things at no additional cost. An audio track for children that helps activate focus and confidence. The original book that inspired the film The Secret, the version with more depth, valued at $20 on Amazon, a guided visualization across the 4 areas of your life, and a printed infographic of the 5 most important habits for building the future you were designed for. All of it backed by a 1 to 100% money-back guarantee with no conditions and no limits on use. One thing I have to tell you plainly: there are counterfeit versions of this product circulating, websites using the same name that carry no actual entrainment technology, just ordinary audio. The only way to receive the original with the full technology, all 4 bonuses, and the guarantee is through the link in the description and the pinned comment of this message. Please do not search for it on Amazon, on any streaming platform, or anywhere else. The link I have placed is the only verified access point. For those who feel drawn to explore this, it is there for you. For those who are not drawn to it today, everything I said before this still stands. What God placed in you was never taken. It was preserved. The tool is secondary to the truth. And the truth is this: the activation you are feeling right now is real, and what you are about to understand is going to change what you call it. Because everything I have shown you in this first half, the fire that is attention, the calling that survives the underground, the God-given frequency the world tried to suppress, all of it is pointing toward one question. Not what you have, not even who you are, but why God cancelled everything to protect it in the first place. That is where we are going. There was a woman named Esther, and what most people remember about her story is the courage the moment she walked into the throne room uninvited, carrying the weight of an entire people on the outcome of a single conversation. That is the dramatic part. That is the part that gets remembered and retold. But what I want you to think about is the part before that. The years in the palace where she did not yet understand why she was there, the preparation she was receiving without knowing what it was preparing her for. The positioning that looked, from the inside, like coincidence, a chain of events that no one had deliberately engineered, that had simply arrived one after another, the language lessons, the favor she found without seeking it, the relationships that formed in her, quietly, while the larger purpose remained invisible to her. She was being shaped for something she had not yet been shown. And then Mordecai said something that changed the entire frame. He did not say, "Be brave." He did not say, "You are strong enough for this." He said something much more structural. He said, "Perhaps you have come to this position for such a time as this." That is not encouragement. That is theology. That is the language of heaven's economy. Because God does not position people accidentally. He does not invest preparation casually. When the circumstances of a life are rearranged to place someone in a specific place at a specific time, that placement is intentional. The preparation is intentional. The timing is intentional. Nothing that carried Esther to that doorway was random. Not the years before the palace, not the years inside it, not the relationships, not the favor, not the skills, not the depth of character that could hold the weight of a moment that would change the course of thousands of lives. None of it was accidental. And here is the principle I want to give you, because it runs beneath every story I have shared with you today. God does not cancel things for crisis management. He does not stop the ordinary movement of things because something went wrong and he needs to fix it. He cancels things for covenant investment. When heaven redirects its attention toward a specific life, that life is about to return something to the world that could only have been produced by exactly this season, the exact fire it survived, the exact wilderness it walked, the exact years of underground preparation that looked, from the outside, like nothing. Heaven does not make that kind of investment carelessly. But here is where most people stop receiving this truth. Right at the threshold. Right when the evidence is clearest and the next season is nearest. Something inside says, "Not me, not really." Maybe this is true in principle. Maybe it is true for others, but I know too much of my own internal landscape to believe I am the one being prepared for something that significant. I want to speak to that voice directly, because I know it, and I know what it is not. That voice is not humility. Humility is clear-eyed and calm. It does not flinch from good news. Real humility can receive a blessing without needing to deflect it. What I am describing is something else. It is a defense mechanism that was built over years of hoping and being disappointed, a way of lowering the stakes before they can be lowered for you. A wall built not to keep danger out, but to keep hope at a manageable and survivable size. Think about the specific moment it shows up. You are somewhere quiet in prayer, or lying still in the early morning before the day begins, and something in you stirs, a sense of calling, a clarity, even a brief one, about what you are meant for, and within seconds the counter voice arrives. But you have failed before. But look at what you still struggle with. But you are not that kind of person. That is not wisdom speaking. That is scar tissue. Old protection that was built for a wound that has already been healed. And here is what scar tissue does not know. The wound it was built to protect is no longer there. You are not who you were when that defense was necessary. You do not have to resolve this today. You do not have to feel it perfectly or receive it all at once. You just have to sit with this. The reason God stopped everything was not accidental. The reason He stopped for you specifically was not accidental. And the person He was protecting when He stopped that person is not the diminished version the defensive voice describes. Come back with me for a moment to the refiner's fire. The master craftsman does not hold ordinary material in the flame. Ordinary material cannot sustain what the fire produces. The structure is not designed for it. What goes into the fire is the material that has capacity the craftsman can already see. The fire does not determine the value of the metal. The craftsman already knew the value when he chose it. The fire is how the permanent form is made, how the surface impurities are separated from what is real, how what is temporary is removed, so that what is lasting can become fully itself. You have been in the fire, not because heaven needed to test whether you had value. You were already known. You have been in the fire because the permanent form cannot be made any other way. And what is being made in you is not small, it is not ordinary, it is the thing that God cancelled everything to protect. Let me say the most important thing now slowly, because it deserves to settle before we move. God did not stop everything to rescue you from the fire. He stopped everything because the fire was producing something. He would not allow the world to interrupt. Stay with that. Let it move through you before we go further. The silence was not His distance. It was His most focused proximity. The wilderness was not His forgetting. It was His formation. The stripping of the version of you that needed approval before you claimed your gifts, that was not loss. That was the removal of what would have gotten in the way. Every layer of this season has been the same craftsman, the same fire, the same intention, producing something permanent, producing a specific version of you that could only exist on the other side of exactly this. And I want to name what is being produced. Not in general terms, specifically, because you need to know what you carry. You are a light bearer, not because you perform light, not because you have everything together or speak the right words at the right times. You are a light bearer because something happens in spaces when you arrive. People feel safer than they should around a stranger. Conversations go to depth faster than normal. The temperature of a room changes in a way that cannot be fully explained. You have known this on some level for a long time, and you have never quite known what to do with it. You have probably learned to minimize it, to explain it away, to wonder if you were imagining it. You were not imagining it. This is not personality. This is assignment. You are a seer. You have felt shifts before they arrived, known things before they were confirmed, sensed what was true in a situation while everyone around you was still in the process of deciding. You have been told directly or indirectly that you are too sensitive, that you read too much into things, that you feel too deeply for your own good. But sensitivity of that kind is not a weakness that happens to look like a gift. It is the gift itself, you see. That is what you do. And what is coming is going to need you to trust what you see without apologizing for it. You are a cycle breaker. The patterns that came before you in your family, in your history, in the lines of inheritance that no one chose, they end with you. Not through effort alone, and not through force, but through the simple and profound fact of who you are becoming and what you have chosen in the quiet of your faithfulness, not to pass forward. You did not come here to continue what was. You came to end it and to begin what comes after. That is a weight, and it is also a calling, and you have been carrying it longer than you knew. You are a spiritual warrior. You have been tested at a level that most people are never tested at. The pressure you have been under, the sustained, grinding kind that does not come in one dramatic wave, but in a long and quiet accumulation, that kind of pressure would have broken someone who was not made to carry it. And you bent. There were seasons when you bent all the way down to the ground, but you did not break. That is not coincidence. That is architecture. You were built for the weight you have been carrying because the weight itself was preparing you for the assignment that is coming. Say this quietly to yourself right now, not to manufacture a feeling, but because it is true. I am not forgotten. I am formed. I am not delayed. I am positioned. I am not abandoned. I am being completed. Do not rush past those words. Let them find the place in you they are meant to reach. And now there is something that has been carried long enough. Something that needs to be set down, not dramatically, not in a moment of performance, but in a quiet and interior act of release. Right where you are. The ceiling you built to protect yourself from disappointment, you can breathe past it now. Let your chest expand slightly as you breathe in, and as you breathe out, let the old boundary dissolve a little. Not all at once, just a little more open than before. The version of you that stayed small so the fall would not be as far, put it down. You do not need it anymore. The wall that kept hope at a survivable size, you are allowed to let it stand a little less solid. What God stopped everything to protect does not need that ceiling. It was never designed to live under one. This is how you walk from here, not by adding more striving, not by pressing harder or believing more loudly, but by practicing one thing, receiving what is already true. When the voice of calling rises in you, and within seconds the counter voice arrives to disqualify it, you now know what that counter voice is. You know it is scar tissue, old protection, not wisdom, not discernment, not the voice of God. You do not have to argue with it. You just do not have to obey it. The discernment you will need going forward is simpler than you think. The voice of calling feels like settled conviction, quiet, not conditional, not contingent on circumstances changing first. The voice of fear feels like frantic urgency, loud, conditional, requiring proof before it will allow you to move. You already know the difference between them. You have felt both. Trust the one that does not need to shout. I want to say one final, honest thing before we close. I cannot tell you exactly when. That is not something I am given to know, and anyone who gives you specific timelines is handing you something less than truth, dressed up as faith. What I can tell you is the pattern. And the pattern has been consistent across every life I have pointed to today. After the wilderness deployment, after the pit, the palace, after the hidden years, the moment of being revealed, after the fire, the permanent form that could not have existed without it. You are inside that sequence right now, not at the beginning of it, further along than you know, closer to the threshold than the length of the road behind you might suggest. For those who are sitting with everything I have said and still feel the resistance, that is all right. You do not have to receive it all today. Hold what you can. Let the rest find you in its own time. These words are not going anywhere. And what is true about you was true before this moment. And it will still be true tomorrow morning when you wake up and the ordinary begins again. Now let me close this in the way it deserves to be closed. Father, we come into this moment carrying something that has been carried for a long time. And before we ask for anything, before we declare anything, we want to say thank you. Not for the easy seasons, but for the ones that cost something. The ones where faithfulness was not a feeling, but a daily choice made without visible return. The ones where trust was the only option left and somehow it held. Thank you for being present in those seasons, the way you were not from a distance, but specifically, focused, intentional, with the full weight of your attention on this one life. We receive that now. You saw it all. Every prayer spoken into what felt like an empty room. Every weight carried without applause. Every moment of choosing not to quit when quitting would have been the more reasonable thing. Every small faithfulness in the dark that no one witnessed, you witnessed it. None of it was invisible to you. None of it passed unacknowledged in heaven. And now, in this moment, we release what has been carried long enough. We release the old ceiling, the one we built to keep hope manageable. We release the belief that staying small is safer than rising. We release the comparison that has had us measuring our calling against someone else's timeline. We release the unworthiness, the voice that says, "Not me, not really." We release the wound that taught us to pre-qualify our gifts before anyone else could take them. We release the fear of what visibility costs. We release the version of ourselves that was built for protection rather than for purpose. One breath at a time, we release it. Now we receive. We receive the full expression of who we were designed to be, the light bearer, the seer, the cycle breaker, the warrior. We receive the connections that are aligned with our calling and the quiet closing of every door that is not. We receive clarity over what we are meant for, not as a distant future thing, but as a present reality we are stepping into now. We receive provision that moves with purpose, arriving in the measure it is needed. And we receive the deep and settled knowing that what God started in us, He will complete. We cover what is rising. What has been built in the fire, let nothing pull it back down. What was formed in the wilderness, let it step fully into the light it was formed for. And what has been preserved underground, through every season that tried to extinguish it, let this be the season it breaks ground. We are not forgotten. We are formed. We are not delayed. We are positioned. We are not abandoned. We are being completed. It is done. It is sealed. We receive it. In Jesus' name, amen. Take a breath. If this message reached you today, if something in here found the thing you have been carrying, I want to ask you to type the word "formed" in the comments right now. Just that one word. It is a declaration that what has been built in you is real and that you are ready to receive what comes next. If someone in your life is in the season I described today, the silence, the waiting, the wondering whether any of it is seen, send this to them. They need to hear this. And for those who felt drawn to the 7-minute tool I mentioned, the link to the original verified product is in the description and the pinned comment below. That is the only place to find the real thing. Go well, chosen one. What comes next, you were made for it.